Good morning, I'm Arlie Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for January 24th, 2025. Well, there was big drama yesterday in Washington and in a village in the Alps called Davos, as President Trump had a showdown with the elite establishment of the corporate cartels who make a pilgrimage to Davos every January, where they sit in comfort and luxury and plot out the next year of looting and control of the physical economy, the control of the world economy. Now, I just wrote an article about the showdown and the broader implications. It'll be posted on my website this weekend, titled Davos 2025, The Last Stand of the Liberal Globalists. And this gets to the first question that I got for our Friday questions. What do you think of Trump's speech at Davos? Well, I would say this. It was purposeful. It wasn't the most eloquent or beautiful speech, but he put forward what he wanted to put forward, namely, first, promoting what he called his revolution of common sense, which is essentially a reversal of the policies of the Biden administration, of the European Union, of the globalist cartels. And these include an end to war and an end to the Green New Deal as the most prominent among them. And as he was speaking, he knew very well that he was speaking to people who had spent the previous 2 or 3 days fighting to protect the Paris Climate Accord, which Trump pulled the United States out of, and to continue the war in Ukraine against Russia. So Trump's speech was a very direct attack on the policies of Davos. The war in Ukraine, which he said has to end. The Green New Deal, which he said is deindustrializing countries. It's a fraud. It's the reason he had to leave the Paris Accord. And then finally, unfair trade practices, which he said have been the policy of the European countries toward the United States. Now, he blamed Biden for dragging down the United States, but the policies he identified with Biden have been the policies of the European Union. Now, the Davos elite fought back. Their main spokesman for this was Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Council. Von der Leyen said there's no turning back from the Green New Deal. She said that this is an existential question for Europe. And she was backed up by several other speakers, and a lot of the chatter in the room was, what can you do when the president of the United States is backing out of these climate agreements? Now, unfortunately for the Davos crowd, there's no connection at all in their minds between the economic problems that they were discussing, namely inflation, the energy crisis, deindustrialization, labor shortages. In their minds, no connection between that and the failed policies that they were promoting. And this is why Davos is going down. If you can't see the effect of your policies, how are you going to change them? Now, keep in mind that Davos was created in 1971 as an initiative by Klaus Schwab, who's now the retired CEO of Davos. 1971 is a crucial moment because it was later that year that the dollar crisis triggered by the British was used to convince Richard Nixon to end the Bretton Woods system, to end the gold reserve backing of the dollar, and led within 2 years to floating exchange rates, which began an era of speculation. That is, the transformation of what had been a post-World War II physical economy into a speculative bubble Ponzi scheme. And this was not only the policy of the United States, but this was the policy that was promoted by Schwab and his associates at Davos. The shift in the economy was from that being defined as a policy toward physical goods production and transformation of nature for the purpose of improving the standard of living for a growing number of people into a consumer society in which the goal became monetary profit. Not coincidentally, the Davos elite include many billionaires who make their billions by manipulating people with disinformation, seductive advertising, and so on. But the ultimate goal of Schwab and his cohorts is a deindustrialization in which the advanced sector continues to be funded through a neo-colonial system of looting, and at the same time, a censorship policy to keep the population that's the target from knowing what's going on. Now, Davos Man was defined by Samuel Huntington, the notorious sidekick of Kissinger, who wrote the book Clash of Civilizations. And Huntington in 2004 wrote of Davos Man as one with, quote, little need for national loyalty, viewing national boundaries as obstacles that thankfully are vanishing, and seeing national governments as residues from the past whose only useful function is to facilitate the elite's global operations. This is a definition of a world without sovereign nations, in which sovereignty is ended and all nations are brought under the governance of the technocracy of global bankers, financial operatives, the BlackRocks and Vanguards of the world. But the Davos Man is threatened now by the collapse of his policies and the emergence of a new paradigm led by the BRICS nations in the global south, and which now has, as part of its opposition to Davos, the imperfect but compelling presence of the new president of the United States, Donald Trump. Now, the second question I got was, can the Gaza ceasefire lead to peace if Netanyahu remains prime minister? I would say no. Netanyahu has to go. He's a war criminal who should be facing trial in The Hague for his sponsorship of genocide. Alongside him should be Tony Blinken and Joe Biden, who were complicit in Israel's policy of genocide against the Palestinians. So Netanyahu must go, but that's up to the people of Israel. But minimally, the funds should be cut from the Israel Defense Forces and Netanyahu, the funds which are necessary to keep the government going and to buy the weapons that are used for the killing. But you need more than that. Just getting rid of Netanyahu, you still have a problem that Israel is a dysfunctional society, as the people there were supporters of the genocidal attacks against the Palestinians. What's necessary to bring peace is an economic policy which provides mutual benefit. In other words, a policy to underwrite peace by incentivizing cooperation and to break the old habits that were imposed on the region by the imperial powers. That is, that the fight for the creation of the state of Israel as a Jewish state was an operation run out of the city of London, using the post-Holocaust Jewish population as the battering ram to be deployed against the Arab states. Now, that's not necessarily to blame the Israeli people, except that they need to know that's what they were brought there to do. And the solution is to find a way to live in peace, not as an occupying force, but to live side by side with the Israeli population and be able to raise their children without fear of the oppression of the occupation. Now, how do you do that? You need an economic policy. Some people say you have to get the political solution first, then you can work on the economy. Problem is you never get there. That's been the last 70 years the promise over and over and over. Well, let's solve this political dysfunction, then we can work on the economy. Well, Lyndon LaRouche offered a plan to break out of that. It was called the Oasis Plan. The idea that you will have canals running from the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, to the Dead Sea, canals that will be lined with power plants that can desalinate water, that will bring life to the desert, not just in Israel and Palestine, but for the neighboring countries as well. But this requires funding. It requires capital goods. It requires a spirit of cooperation. And this is what LaRouche brought to the situation. He said that there's no essential reason why this couldn't be done. And in fact, if you're serious about some kind of policy such as the Abraham Accords, this would be the ideal project to launch that. And that would include bringing in the Chinese with their transport corridors so that the projects and the work that's done in the newly fertile land can then be shipped as exports around the world, besides providing for the food needs of the people of the region. So the Oasis Plan, which we have put up on our website, in fact, this goes back, LaRouche first started talking about this in 1975. And the project itself could have been brought in under the economic annexes of the Oslo Accord. The Oslo Accord was never realized because of the opposition of people like Netanyahu and his extremist gang of settlers, who instead insisted that the land is theirs and that the Palestinians have no right to be there. Not only that, but that extremist grouping was responsible for the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, who was the principal force behind the Oslo Plan. So I'll have a link to the Oasis Plan in the description section, as well as a link for you to have a chance to listen to the dialogue between Helga Zepp-LaRouche and Colonel Larry Wilkerson. And at 11 a.m. today, at the Schiller Institute site, you can participate in the meeting of the Zoom call of the International Peace Coalition. So there's a lot of work to do. The showdown at Davos was dramatic, but it's not a final stage. We still have to send the Davos Man packing off the theater of the political arena and replace it with policies that are based on this new security and development architecture.